You guys probably recognize this guy from a famous clip that made the rounds recently with him in it. This is Stephen Dollins, and he said some really, really crazy stuff about Pokemon back in like the 2000s. Why don't we continue listening to the Pokemon tell us about how he was in the Church of Satan? If you haven't seen part 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, doesn't matter. I try to make these independent so you can jump in at any point and continue on.
When I got in as a freshman in college, I decided that what I wanted to do is I wanted to follow in my father's footsteps, and I wanted to be a teacher too. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to teach either elementary level or high school level speech and English. And so that's what I set out to do. And my freshman year, at the end of my freshman semester, we were given an assignment. We had 5 months to do this in. And we were supposed to, first of all, write an essay for English. And that's how you got your English grade. And then you were supposed to give that essay as a speech for your speech class, and that's how you got your speech grade.
Okay.
And so I said, what am I going to do this on? What in the world am I going to write on? I know. I'll prove that witchcraft and magic don't work. Because you see, I'd watched this on TV to the point to where I was convinced that it was just on TV. You know, witches are just on TV.
That's accurate. Witches are just on... I mean, witchcraft does not exist. Witchcraft is pretend. You are incapable of hexing people in reality. That is pretend. And the fact that this guy seems to have bought into it is deeply, deeply sad. It's really sad for our educational system that they didn't teach him enough critical thinking to realize that it's pretend.
The good witch, the bad witch, they don't exist. And so I set out to prove that it didn't exist. And
there's no need to prove that it doesn't exist. It doesn't. It's nonsense. It's fabricated.
Did that in a small town in Oklahoma who has only one small library and a bookstore downtown.
Library. I love it.
And the bookstore is actually the drugstore. So I went in there and I went to the library and I started looking for all kinds of...
That's just what he calls it, library. This is just the best. The best in every way.
And the bookstore is actually the drugstore. So I went in there and I went to the library and I started looking for all kinds of books on witchcraft. Couldn't find them. How many know you can't find them because the witches get in there and steal them out of there? So you can't get a hold of their material. Same thing.
Are you serious? He believes that people publish books on witchcraft, right? And all of the witches go around and steal those books so that nobody knows how they do it because the books explain how they do their witchcraft. I love it.
How many know you can't find them because the witches get in there and steal them out of there? So you can't get a hold of their material. Same thing the Masonic Lodge does. Send the Masons in there, steal the books out of there so you can't find out what they believe.
This is getting weirder by the second.
So I said, well, I'll go over to the drugstore. Now, Alva, the town I came from is a very small town. And I mean, it's one of those towns where everybody knows everybody, and everybody knows everybody else's business. And so I walked into that drugstore and I real calmly said, do you have any books on witchcraft? He said, what? I said, do you have any books on witchcraft? He looked at me and said, do I need to call your mother? I said, no. So I nixed that idea and I got out of there real quick. And I said, well, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to write these magazines and I'm going to have to send off for these occult books. You know, in the back of those, some of those magazines you can send off and you send in $10 or $15 or whatever it is, and they mail you a book.
This is so deeply ridiculous. I just can't even. I don't even know what the guy is talking about right now. Like, what magazines are you talking about? I've never heard of these magazines you write off and get copies of books from the back. What? They should have called his mother. Exactly, says Shakespeare. I absolutely agreed.
I got about 20 of them, and I read them from cover to cover. And I thought, hey, I've got a lot of information right here. Then I thought, you know, if I'm going to give up there, this is good for the essay, but if I'm going to give up there and give a speech on this, I better be able to say that I know for a fact that it doesn't work because I met some people that claim to be witches, and I watched them, and nothing happened. So I said, okay, now I know what I have to do. I have to find a witch. Now, you know what it's like to walk on a college campus and you walk up to somebody and go, hey, are you a witch? You know?
Yeah, embarrassing, as it should be, because it's stupid. Witches are not real. It should be an embarrassing event to do, honestly. It really should. You should be embarrassed by this, Steve. But you're not, weirdly.
We had something there.
Yeah, is this a literal witch hunt that we're talking about right now? Good point, progress only.
You know, and I passed on down and I was in the student center one day, and I played in a rock and roll band at that time. I played in rock and roll band since I was 13 years old. I recorded like 3 CDs with different groups. They never went anywhere except on my wall, you know, where I could look around and go, hey, I did that. You know, but one of those, and I was, at the time I was playing with a heavy metal band there at the college, and the drummer was from the East Coast. And we were sitting in the student center one day, and I had my hand in my hands, and I looked pretty depressed, and he looked over at me and he said, what's the matter? I said, I don't know, man. I said, I've got to find information on this stuff. I've got several months to do this essay, and then I've got to give it as a speech, and I can't find any information. He said, what are you doing it on? I said, I'm setting out to prove that witchcraft and the occult don't work. He said, are you sure about that? I said, well, yeah, I'm fairly sure. I mean, I haven't seen anything. I've been watching people, but I can't see anything. He said, I think I can help you out. And I said, how's that? I could introduce you to a couple.
This is like a story that some guy is telling to try to prevent kids from doing drugs. He's telling his story of his first dalliance with drugs, if you will. Like, I was standing in a back alley. Some guy approached me who had a 666 shirt on. And he said, hey, kid, you want to try some of this? That's like the level of story that we're at right now, I feel. That's where we're at.
He said, I think I can help you out. And I said, how's that? I could introduce you to a couple. Oh, are they witches? No, but they know people. I said, cool. I'll be waiting. Sure enough, he introduced me to Kenny and Christy. Now, Kenny, I'll explain it to you. Kenny looks like somebody left over from the hippie days. I mean, he had the real long, scraggly hair and the unkept beard, and his eyes were glazed because he was on pot 24 hours a day.
What a monster. On pot 24 hours a day? Wow.
And his beautiful wife, Christy, who was a nice blonde flower child. I mean, she had the nice long dress and the sandals, and she had, you know, beads on her wrist and beads around her. Well, she was beady, you know. And so
I feel like that was a joke, but nobody in the audience, including myself, understood what he was trying to communicate with it.
I got introduced to them, and I loved them. I loved them. I loved going over there to their house because Kenny and Christy are the first ones to introduce me to mescaline, LSD.
It turned into one of those stories anyways, didn't it? It wasn't supposed to be about doing drugs, but here we are. It turned out to be after all. This is the gateway drug story that those people on TV tell to try to prevent kids from doing drugs. Okay.
Belladonna, hashish.
Belladonna? He recreationally enjoyed belladonna is what he's telling me? That's weird because, wait, okay, first of all, belladonna is a poison. I would not recommend taking belladonna just recreationally. As far as I knew, belladonna didn't actually give you a high of any sort. I know that it's used to dilate your pupils. I know that my mom's homeopathic doctor prescribed it, quote unquote, when I was little. Yeah, my mom was super into homeopathy when I was little. I'm just trying to figure out if this is actually a stimulant or something. Does it have any drug effects with it, or is it just straight up poisonous? People used to use belladonna a long time ago to dilate their pupils. Like back in the, 1800s, women would take belladonna to make themselves look prettier. But it really is just a poison. It's a poisonous plant, also known as deadly nightshade. Apparently it can cause vivid hallucinations and delirium. I did not know that. Interesting. So, okay. I guess there's that. So we've determined that belladonna is a poison that you should not be taking under any circumstances ever. But apparently this guy seems to believe that people do. I was involved in the drug world for like a long time. A long time. I never knew anybody at any point that took belladonna. and I was into all of it. Of course, this is coming from the guy who claims to be a high priest in the in the Church of Satan. So, there's that.
I loved them. I loved going over there to their house because Kenny and Christy are the first ones to introduce me to mescaline, LSD, belladonna, hashish, marijuana. I mean, everything that you wanted, it was right there. And used to love to go over there and get high and sit in front of his stereo and listen to all these rock and roll records. And I was having so much fun that I almost forgot why I was there in the first place. And finally, I looked over at him and I said, I think I heard that you can help me out. And he said, what's that? And I said, I have got to find somebody that claims to be a witch. I mean, I don't care what it takes. I've got to find this person and talk to him and get information from him. He said, well, just a minute. He said, who referred you to me? And I said, Dave, the drummer. He went in and called Dave, just so he could confer that actually Dave did refer me. And he said, okay. He said, just a minute. And he went back in and he made another phone call. And 15 minutes later, he walked back in the room and said, it's all set. And I said, what's all set? He said, you're going to be asked to come to a meeting.
He acts like this is some dark underworld that like nobody's supposed to know about and that he had access to. He's acting like it's the drug underworld. That's really how he's acting right now.
You're going to receive a phone call. He said, you be ready to go when that phone call comes. Don't call me to try to find out when they're going to call. I don't know. But when they call, you better be ready to go. I said, okay. I waited for a month for that call. And it came on a Thursday night. I had a big test Friday morning. Dad had just told me, better get to bed, son. You got a big test tomorrow. And I said, yeah, Dad, I'm going.
This is actually, I got to give it to the guy. He's very good at building a convincing story. He knows how to lie to people really well. And that's pretty impressive. Not something that I would pride myself in, but you do you, I suppose.
11:45, the phone rang. Got up and answered it. Lady on the other end identified herself as a woman named Alexandria, said she was a priestess of a coven. She said, here's the address, here's how to get there, come now. I'm looking at my watch and I'm sitting there, it's almost 12. It's almost midnight.
I guess they could be pranking him. I mean, that's plausible, right? He tells somebody he wants to prove witchcraft is real, so this Dave guy calls up his buddy Kenny, and then he's like, Kenny, send him to this one person, and we'll just prank the shit out of him. That's plausible, I suppose. That's a plausible explanation for how this happened.
She said, here's the address, here's how to get there, come now. I'm looking at my watch and I'm sitting there, it's almost 12. It's almost midnight. She said, we know, come now. And if you don't come now, you won't get another call. You won't hear from us again. I said, well, I got to get this information. So I hollered in at Dad and I said, Dad, I've got a good friend that's in trouble, just broke up with his girlfriend, and he's, talking crazy and stuff, and I got to go over there and talk to him. And Dad said, okay, but be back early. Yeah, right. So I went over there and I walked into this apartment. And here was Alexandria, identified herself. She introduced herself and she said she was glad to meet me. And I walked in and I noticed that it was just a regular apartment, except that most of the women there were nude and semi-nude, and they were all sitting around in this white circle painted on the floor. And inside that circle was a five-pointed star. And on the candles lit at each point of that star. And they were inside that thing, and they were singing, and they were chanting, and they were humming, and I had no idea what the song was. I started humming along so I didn't look out of place.
This is so bizarre and ridiculous, I can't. People really believed him when he told this story. The people in the audience believed this.
And they said, now what we're going to do, we're going to sit you inside that circle, and don't get out of there. And we're going to send people back to you one at a time, and you ask them anything you want to ask them. But we sit you in that circle, don't get out. And I said, why is that? She said, because we've been charging the air with all of the spirits, and we've been really summoning up our deities, and you're an outsider. And if you get outside that circle, you may be subject to attack from whatever's still left over. I said, don't worry, I'm not going anywhere.
So far, the story that he's told could have been a prank. Up to this point, it could have been somebody playing a prank on him, right? He gets even more specific. Just wait.
So I got in there and I sat down, and sure enough, they came back one at a time, and they sat in front of a candle, and I asked them everything I wanted to ask them. How do you cast a hex? How do you make a love potion? How do you do a love spell?
You don't. They're fake. This is all fake. I am honestly at a loss for how you didn't catch on to this earlier.
You summon spirits. And by the time I got done, which was 4 o'clock the next morning, I left there and I had a big notebook, and I knew then I was ready. So I got back to the house and I started reading through all the things that I'd been told. And I said, okay, I said, this is really great, but if I'm going to give a speech on this, I'm going to have to say that I actually tried these things and I know for a fact that they don't work.
Wait, is there somebody in the chat who has done all this stuff before and understands what he's talking about? Because I'm unfamiliar. Like, I've never really gone to, like, one of these circles or whatever. I just happen to know for a fact that witchcraft is pretend. Some pagans choose to cast a circle for rituals. Leaving the circle after it's cast is taboo. Okay, interesting. We do our rituals and have a blast. Sometimes we dance nude. Really? Is that real? So sometimes they do it nude? Okay. Well, at least we've verified which parts of the story are completely fabricated and which he actually read about online. Anybody here believe that the guy actually did go to a real, like, pagan ritual or whatever else, or is he just completely making it up? I'm leaning on he researched it. I'm leaning toward he got on the internet, or what existed as the internet in 2000 or so when he did this. He got on the internet and read about how this works. I don't think he ever attended one of these rituals or whatever at any point in time. All right, let's keep listening.
But if I'm going to give a speech on this, I'm going to have to say that I actually tried these things and I know for a fact that they don't work. So I got my friends together and we started doing things out of there. All the things that they had told me, hexes, love spells, curses, everything we could think of. And you know what? Every last one of them worked. So then I'm thinking, hey, maybe I better change over a little bit here. Instead of proving that it doesn't work, maybe I better set out to prove that it does work because I've already seen it.
Okay, then you shouldn't be setting out to prove that it does because you've already proven that it works, right? I don't understand why you'd be setting out to prove that it works when you just watched it happen. Like I said, this is all complete and total nonsense from the ground up. At first I thought, did the guy get pranked? Maybe he got pranked. I'm starting to lean toward he was never at a ritual, like a pagan ritual at any point. I'm leaning toward he just read about it on the internet, and that's it. I'm thinking that's what happened.
I gave my essay and I gave my speech, got an A+ on it, walked outside the classroom. 2 girls were waiting for me outside. Said, we've been watching you. We know that you have inborn powers. Now, I had no idea because I had never said anything to anybody about my childhood. Said, we know you have inborn powers. We can take those powers, we can generate them and make you into what we think is your destiny.
Okay, interesting. We're back to the whole pranking thing again, apparently.
I said, what's that? And she said, just come to this meeting. We're going to have a meeting next Friday night, midnight. You come. I said, okay. They gave me the address, wrote down the address, told me how to get there, a little map. And sure enough, on that Friday night, I drove over there. And it's in the Rissy district of our city. And, you know, we come from a lower middle class. You don't go up in the Rissy district. You know, you don't even have any business up there. But we were driving around up in there, and all of a sudden, I turned the corner, and I recognized the house, and it was my old high school biology teacher.
Oh, my God, dude. So he's telling us that his old high school biology teacher was a witch and was... Oh, God. This is so ridiculous from the ground up.
And I pulled up in the driveway, and I got...
Yeah, why midnight? That's a good point, Duke AJ. Why midnight? Why did this have to take place at midnight? And why all the secrecy? This is so ridiculous.
Biology teacher. And I pulled up in the driveway, and I got out, and I went up to the door, and I thought, man, I've got the wrong house. Knocked on the door, and, I was shocked when he answered the door.
You know the truly unbelievable part of this whole story? The idea that a high school biology teacher would be able to afford a ritzy place, an upper middle class place. Completely ridiculous. Like the whole story, but that That detail just kicks it right over the edge for me. I'm sorry. I can't. Evolutionists or witches is the point here, I guess. Yeah, thank you for that, apostate pajamas. Evolutionists or witches, I think, is the point.
And I pulled up in the driveway, and I got out, and I went up to the door, and I thought, man, I've got the wrong house. Knocked on the door, and I was shocked when he answered the door. And he was dressed in a black robe, holding a black...
Why were you shocked? Evolutionists equal witches, right?
I was shocked when he answered the door. And he was dressed in a black robe, holding a black candle. And he said, I'm glad to meet you, Stephen. He said, come on in, we've been expecting you. And sure enough, my old high school biology teacher came out from the back. And I said, you too? He said, yes. And now I was looking for the circle on the floor, so you can imagine I was pretty relieved when I didn't see any circles, painted on the floor, and people were dressed. So I felt pretty much comfortable. The only difference was that on his wall, on the right-hand side, was a black cross hanging upside down.
Oh, he's exited witchcraft and entered Satanism, basically, is the implication here, I think.
And then as you go back to the halls, on each side of the walls, there were pictures depicting pictures of hell, like demons casting people off into hell flames with...
Yeah, and of course Satanists are super excited to go to hell. Absolutely, yeah, that checks out, totally.
Hell, like demons casting people off into hell flames with pitchforks, things like that. And I looked at him and I said, you're a devil worshiper? And he said, yes. He said, we know where the true power is. And I said, oh. And so he said, I want to introduce you to someone. Man came out of the back. He was about 6'2", thin, had a hood on his head, still in a black robe, carrying another black candle. He walked out and introduced himself as Michael. And Michael said, glad to meet you. He said, we're very interested in you. He said, we've been watching you very carefully. In fact, we know things about you that you don't think we know.
Oh my God, this is a ridiculous story, dude. This is absolutely ridiculous. 700 bees in a human suit. Midnight is the witching hour. It would be more auspicious if it was the full moon. That's a fair point. You're right. That's a really good point. Thanks for pointing that out. I hadn't thought about that. Maybe that's why he said it happened at midnight, because midnight is the witching hour. This guy is so ridiculous. Just everything about the guy is ridiculous. I can't.
In fact, we know things about you that you don't think we know. Now that made me feel real comfortable. Then he looked at me and he said, we think you just may be the new blood we're looking for. Now I want to tell you something. You're in a group of people that are holding black candles, they're dressed in black robes, and you know they worship the devil, and they look at you and tell you that you're the new blood they're looking for. First thing that goes through your mind is, oh my God, they want to sacrifice me.
You're a wizard, Harry. Exactly. It's got the same vibes right now. You're the new blood we've been looking for. You're a wizard, Harry.
But that wasn't the case, and he must have read my mind, because he said, no, that's not it. He said, our leader is going back to a grotto. Grotto, by the way, in witchcraft you have covens, and that's 13 young women. It could be older women, but 13 women, then you have a high priestess that rules over them. In Satanism, you have what's called grottos, and there are no certain number of men or women. It's just all mixed. Then you have a high priest and a high priestess that rules over them.
That is incorrect. He's specifically talking about the Church of Satan. That's who he's talking about right now. The Church of Satan is a non-theistic church. In fact, it's only church in name. It's only legally considered a church. Like I said, it's non-theistic. They don't believe any of this stuff. But he's claiming that he was a high priest in the Church of Satan. Specifically, if he had named any theistic organization, I may have even fallen for this, or at least parts of it. Like, some of it is just ridiculous, but I may have fallen for the idea that he was a high priest in, this theistic satanic church or whatever. But he said the Church of Satan. Everything past that is nonsense from the ground up. Like, it kind of revealed to me just how completely nonsensical everything that he's saying really is.
And he said he was going back to take over a grotto on the West Coast, and they needed somebody to fill his place. And they thought I was the one that might be just in position for that.
Why would they have you fill in for the leader of this massive organization when there's a hierarchy? Why wouldn't the next person in line take the position as leader of the grotto or whatever else? Why? Why would they pick some rando who has not, like, been involved in this organization at all, who they're just meeting for the first time? Why would they stick you in there? Just ridiculous. Completely ridiculous.
And he said, what we want you to do is we want you to continue to come to meetings. So I did for the next 6 months. And my high school biology teacher became my mentor, taught me everything I needed to know. And by that time, I was really getting really into this. And I mean, the people made me feel so comfortable and so welcome. And so, I mean, they're just like, their hands and their arms were open.
He's describing love bombing. Again, I think this whole story is made up from the very beginning. Like, I don't think any of this really happened to him at all. Based on all the little clues that he drops, I really think he made the entire thing up. But, you know, who knows? Maybe he didn't. Maybe someone was just pranking him and succeeded gloriously.
My high school biology teacher became my mentor, taught me everything I needed to know. And by that time, I was really getting really into this. And I mean, the people made me feel so comfortable and so welcome. And so, I mean, they're just like, their hands and their arms were open. And you'd look over on a table and there'd be lines of cocaine. And there'd be mescaline. And there'd be heroin. I mean, everything.
Yeah, Satanists and witches are not by default involved in drugs. But that's what he's trying to tell you right now. It's like the drug underworld or whatever. It's like the black market. They sell hexes and cocaine simultaneously. Just ridiculous.
Thing that you could imagine would be on this table. And they said, if that's what you want, there it is. And they looked over here and they said, there was a line of women sitting on a couch. And they said, if that's what you're into, he said, all you got to do is point out that woman, we'll send them back in the back. Well,
okay, now it's not just drugs. Now it's not just hexes. It's also human trafficking. Everything bad that you can possibly imagine, the Satanists do, apparently.
Being around Satanists.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the organ catalog. Good point there, M. Beckdorf.
I didn't want to get high, and I'm real shy around women, so that didn't really, that didn't really appeal to me. So I said, no, I'll just stand around and watch, see what you guys do. And so I did. And I picked up everything that they needed to tell me. And then one night they started talking about something about sacrifice. And I looked at them and I thought, no, I don't know about this. Because see, I was dragged to Sunday school, okay, as a child. I was one of those children that when they get out of the car, you see like 2 tracks go from the car all the way up to the porch of the church because they're trying to dig their heels into the ground, keep mom from pulling them along. And I knew about Jesus because I'd studied in Sunday school about Jesus and the little lambs and Jesus and the children and that sort of thing. But I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what he did. And at that time, I didn't know he did it for me. And so something inside said, no, these people are just not for you. And I turned around to walk away. This was the last part of 69. Turned around to walk away.
The last part of 69? What? What does he mean by that? I don't understand.
These people are just not for you. And I turned around to walk away. This was the last part of 69. Turned around to walk away. And I'll never forget, he put his hand on my shoulder. Michael put his hand on my shoulder, turned me around, and with cold black eyes, he said, you'll be back. I said, I don't think so. September 1970, I was working on, after classes, I'd go over and work on stage sets for college plays. And I was up on the scaffold, and I was putting up lighting for a play they were getting ready to put on that weekend. And a young man came running through the door, and he said, hey, did you just hear the news? He said, some old man just got killed, hit and run. And I hollered down, I said, what? He said, yeah, I was just on the radio. He said, some old man was on his bicycle, and a guy hit him with a car and it hit and run. They can't find him. They can't catch him. And now the first thing went to my mind was, well, he deserved it. Some old man on a bicycle, he didn't need to be out there in the first place.
What? Who would think that? What a deeply evil person to think to yourself, Some old man got hit riding his bicycle. He deserved it because he shouldn't have been riding his bicycle in the first place, or he shouldn't have been out there in the first place. What? Who would think that, unironically? What the hell is going on?
Now, it never dawned on me that my dad, to relax after class, used to like to take his bicycle and the bird dogs and ride about a half a mile outside of town where we had friends that had a farm and they had a vegetable garden, and that's what he loved to do after class to relax. And about 5 minutes later, I got a page, and it was one of Dad's good friends. And he says, "We think you better come home because we think it's your dad. We can't find the bird dogs and his bicycle's gone. Did you hear the news?" And I said, "Yes, I did." He said, "You better come home. We're just waiting for identification." So I got in my car and I hurried home. When I got to the house, all the friends of the family and neighbors were all right around the house. And one of Dad's very, very good friends came up and gave me a big hug, and he said, "We're praying it's not Joe, but we think it's your dad. We're just waiting." And sure enough, within 5 minutes, the Highway Patrol called back and identified positively that it was my dad that had been killed.
That's a sad story. Again, I feel it's pretty obvious you shouldn't trust a single word out of this guy's mouth, not one. The guy has proven himself to be a liar unequivocally. This entire story is likely made up from beginning to end. Does he even have parents? I'm not convinced he was ever born, honestly, at this point. This guy has lied about everything from beginning to end, so.
Man that killed him and hit and run, he had just been released from a mental institution. He was coming back from seeing his lawyer on a sodomy case. He was drunk and going over...
What? He was just released on... he was just released from prison. He was going to see his lawyer on a sodomy case? This is made up. This is made up. There is nothing real about this. A sodomy case. You've got to be kidding me. This is funny. I like this. This is really good.
He had just been released from a mental institution. He was coming back from seeing his lawyer on a sodomy case. He was drunk and going over 100 miles an hour. Came off a bridge and hit my dad from behind as he was riding on a bicycle. Killed him instantly.
Yeah, this is all fabricated beginning to end. I don't believe a single word that this guy says. This is ridiculous, dude.
After the funeral, good meaning people, all they could tell me was that it must have been God's will. God must have needed your dad for something really bad. God must have had something special in heaven. And you know what? That didn't comfort me.
Exactly. Yeah, he's correct. That is not a comfort. Do not tell people God needed your loved one in heaven. Do not tell people that ever. It only hurts them worse every single time. Please don't do that.
That didn't comfort me. That made me extremely angry. And I said, if that's the kind of God that would take my dad off the earth like that, I don't want to have anything to do with him. And I turned around and announced that I was giving up any kind of church, affiliation, that I didn't believe in that God. And I said, I know where the true power is. And I went back to those people and told them now I was ready to join.
I don't believe any of this, like not one word out of his mouth. But my grandfather actually does have a real story just like that. His first son that he ever had, named him after himself. He died of pneumonia at like 3 months old or something. And my grandpa was like a Sunday school teacher and everything, really into church. And he asked the church leader, like, why did God let this happen? And he said, God needed another angel in heaven. That's what he told him. And my grandpa claimed to be an atheist from that moment on for the next 50 years or something. He renounced his Christianity because he was so unhappy with that as an answer. Do not tell people that God needed another angel in heaven. Don't do it. You know what? Do it. Do it. Yeah, because it'll make more atheists. That's not a bad idea, actually. I like that idea.
I had to fill out an application, they told me, send it in to the Church of Satan in San Francisco, California. That's who this group was associated with, run by a man named Anton Szandor LaVey.
Yeah, so he's very specific here. He is, in fact, talking about the Church of Satan, which means he is, in fact, talking about a non-theistic religion. The Church of Satan is non-theistic. They do not believe in God.